My name is Danny Fenton and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. So now I'm looking at just making some seats. I'm actually waiting for some stuff to arrive in the post today, the final servo. So what I'm doing in the meantime, just to make up a bit of time, is I'm going to make a plug for vac-forming some seats. I need 2 seats and they need to be easy to remove. So what I thought I'd do them in is styrene sheets, probably 1mm thick, quite sturdy. And the reason for them being sturdy is these have to be lifted out. The rear one is lifted out to access the servos in the tail, and the front one is removed to access the wing bolts. So the front one's going to be in and out all the time. So I wanted to make something that was easy to make another one if it gets damaged, and also sturdy enough to stand being manhandled like that. I could have made them out of lithoplate, but there's absolutely no point because they're going to get painted matte black anyway. So I'm going to try and do them in a Vacform. So what I'm going to do is just trace out the shape of the cockpit opening. Now this is traced out from the plan view of Jerry Bates's drawings. And I made sure the scale was right, that the width and the height and everything else was right. Obviously the part is at an angle, so I can't really draw around the part. It won't give me the right shape. So that's the plan view of the drawing. So it's not something you would normally cut from. But I've double checked the width and the height, transferred it to a piece of ply, and then what I'll do is I'll measure the height in the fuselage. You'll see in a little while. And we'll cut a piece of foam that shape and then wedge it, and that'll give us the basis for the plug, and then I'll cover that in glass cloth and make it nice and rigid, and then that should be our Vacform plug. The part is then simply transferred to the foam. Just trying to find a sensible way to lay this out so I don't waste the foam too much. I think right, back to the bandsaw. As is often the case with these parts, you end up cutting to the outside of the line, and when you trace it you add another line and eventually you end up bigger than what you want. And in this case we have, so I've got to take this down probably a good millimetre. It needs quite a bit more off than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the bench sander, because it needs more like that much losing from each side. So I'll go down and do that, and it's going to be the same for this. Well, I'll do these bits first and then we'll measure it. So it's now a good 5mm clearance on both sides and front to back, and this will give us enough room for the glass over the top of this, and then the 1mm styrene over that. So you just have to remember to make the plug a lot smaller than the final part. I've placed this in the fuselage, and then I've drawn a line from the lowest point, so this is sat in the fuselage level, and this is where the back angle sort of is, but it needs to come higher than this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece of foam off, and then I'm going to attach that foam to there to make it taller, and then we'll extend the line again. So what I need to do is draw a line across here, and it's just a guideline to help me with cutting. And then on this side I'm about 5mm up, so about 5mm up again, a little bit more, and then it goes to that line there. Again, just to help me with sanding and cutting. Now, I can't cut this on the bandsaw because the throat of my bandsaw is too narrow and it won't go in there. So I'm going to have to cut this by hand, which is a bit unfortunate. But a great saw for doing this sort of work is one of these saws, and it's quite a coarse teeth set on it, but actually it's proving all right. But it's not got a spine along the top here, you see, so you can go right through. And what I've got to try and do is try and keep it straight. So I think what I'll do is I'll come out by about 5mm, and then I'll sand it to the final shape. I think that's probably the safest way of doing this. There we have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that piece to there. I could glue it there, I suppose that would give me enough. So I'll just glue that to there. Now what you have to be careful of is when you're gluing foam to foam and you're going to be sanding it, is don't get any of the glue anywhere near the joint or anywhere near the bit you're going to sand, because then you'll get a funny effect, and the sanding won't go very well. So all I'm going to do is put glue in the middle there, just in that centre section. It'll spread out a little bit, but we should be all right. And then glue that onto there. I'm going to use some of my new 5-minute epoxy. The reason is this doesn't need to be immensely strong, but I do want to crack on. So I'm going to try some of this. I've just bought it. This is Bob Smith Industries 5-minute quick cure epoxy. I've never used it before, so I'm not sure how well it's going to be, how well it's going to work, and whether it will be 5 minutes. Most of these things say 5 minutes, but actually they're not really sandable for 24 hours, but they're usually fairly solid. And that's what happens when you get interrupted by a phone call right when you've mixed glue. Well, I am surprised. I thought that might, where the two parts were touching, I thought that might have set. So I was away for 10 minutes. So right, let's not push our luck, and we'll get this on there. So I'm just going to put some through the middle here, well away from the edges, and that'll do. There we go. Just clean that up with a drop of acetone. There we go. So once that dries, we'll be able to sand it flush. I'll probably do that on the bench sander downstairs, so be back once that's done. So thank you for all the shouts on the sanding pads. I've managed to find some Indasa ones, and they've come from Screwfix in the UK, so that seems to be the right sort of stuff. So thank you very much, but I think I'm sorted now. Right, so looking at my photographs, this is supposedly a Chipmunk seat, but I've seen several that are slightly different. Some have actually got cutouts here for straps and bits and pieces, so I think you really have to photograph your specific aircraft and see what's going on. I was considering putting the detail in the bottom here, but actually most Chipmunk pilots don't sit on these seats, because these seats are designed for you to be wearing a parachute, and the parachute is your seat cushion then. And most Chipmunk jockeys nowadays have foam and nice seat covers, seat cushions made that just sit in there. Some of them have backs on them, some of them just have a base. And I'm just going to fit a base, I think. I'm not sure what my subject aircraft has at the moment. I haven't photographed the cockpit. But I think it's probably just going to be a cushion or something like that. I've never seen Alistair strap a parachute on when he's climbed in. So, and he won't be sitting on that. He'll be sitting on something much softer. So I'm going to put a cushion in there. So I'm not going to do any more detailing on it than that. This will do. What I'll do now is I'll probably make a plywood base that's slightly, well, that's bigger than what I want, and just to act as the return for these panels, for the edges. It'll be vac-formed that way up, and the styrene will be sucked down onto it that way, so the edge flange will then form this lip around the outside. So what I really need is for that to be slightly bigger, say kind of like that, but I'll have to use another piece of ply, kind of like that, but follow the shape a little bit better. And then when I vac form it, that'll form a ridge to cut to. So the next stage, I think, is probably to take a piece of ply and just make the flange. I make a section that's bigger than that all the way around, and then we're into glassing. Well, you've all seen this many times before, but I know some people don't watch all the videos and they just pick up the odd one, so I'll show you again. Right, we're all gloved up. I'm using West Systems 206 slow hardener and 106 epoxy resin. And the beauty of these systems are that one plunger of each gives you the right mix. That should be okay. And you really need to make sure you mix it thoroughly. I'm going to use 48 gram cloth for this. I would normally use 25, but I've got, I think, 4 pieces of 48 gram that I'm going to use. No real reason. It's a nicer cloth to use, and it tends to give you a nice thick or a strong part quite quickly and quite easily. I'm not worried about weight on this, obviously, because it's not going in the airplane. This is just a plug. And for vac forming, you do need a fairly sturdy plug because the act of vac forming, sucking the air out, does create quite a lot of pressure and can pull apart and can crush it effectively. I don't think it would in this, and I'm only going to pull 2 for this model, and you know, if I ever need any spares or anything like that along the line, I'll pull another one, but really I only need to pull 2 forms out of this. So I think we're good to go there. Nice thorough mix. I'm going to use a Jenny brush again. I like these. I did try brushes for a while, but I really didn't get on with them. I like the Jenny brush. So this is the smallest sheet I've got, and it will just go right across to the other side. So that's the one we'll start with. No reason really. Now some people have said, why don't you just pour it on and spread it out? Well, I've tried that, but I don't find that it spreads out as well, and you end up with a lot more resin in one, you know, on than you actually need. So I like this stippling technique that I use. The cloth goes where I want, and it may be a little bit slower, but it seems to be a little bit more precise, and the thickness of the resin is a lot more controllable this way. So slower it may be, but I'm not in any rush. We'll just have to see how well it conforms to the shape around the top here, because it's a slightly heavier cloth, 48 gram rather than the 25 that I normally use. Be an interesting exercise anyway. See how well it shapes. I'll turn it around so you can actually see what's going on here, because it is actually conforming quite well. The beauty of this weave is that it will stretch to go around larger shapes, and it also compresses, shrinks. And that piece there is proving difficult. Let's just try and work it around a bit. I'm not worried if there are some creases in the surface. This is all going to get sanded to the final shape anyway. I probably am asking a bit much of that material, so I think I am going to just put a pleat. In there. One in there. Just to give me a fighting chance. The stuff's good, but it's can't perform miracles. But as you can see, it's gone right down into that crease on this baseboard, which is what we needed. We've got a little lump there and a little lump there, which might have to be sanded off once the thing is completely solid and dry. What What I should have done is made my nick a little bit deeper. So that's one layer on. I'm going to put 3 more on. Okay, well, you don't need to watch anymore. I'll carry on with this, get it all done, and then we'll come back when it's finished. Well, there was me waiting for the clevises and the M3 UJs, universal joints, whatever you want to call them, couplers, ball links. There was me waiting for them to arrive from Model Fixings, and I had a good rummage through the box, and I actually already had some, so so much for waiting. Anyway, I've now fitted them. The rods, you can see, are 10mm carbon, but at this end they're stepped down to 6mm carbon and then M3 rod, and it's all JB welded together to make it nice and secure. At the rear end you can see the 2 push rods are also stepped down again. This time they're stepped down 3 times, so there are that carbon rod you can see there, the main one, has actually been stepped down from about this point here in the fuselage. So it's a little bit narrower through here, and then there's another carbon rod inside that carbon rod, and then there's the M3 threaded rod inside the final carbon rod. So it's almost solid, well, it is solid back to about here, and then it sort of tapers moving forward in strength. You can see the swivel joints are bolted. This is just M2 nuts and bolts. If the tailplane is taken off, this is the area that you've got to disconnect. And you can see access is lovely when the cover is off. So all looking good, I think. Right, so back to the seats. See how we're getting on with those. The epoxy should be nice and dry now. So it's been a day, and as you can see, it's nice and solid. Nice trim around the edges. It's a lot it's a lot thicker than I normally have to deal with, so it's proving a little bit more robust, shall we say. So let's just give ourselves a chance. I'm going to use something with a little bit more coarser grit, so this the coarse edge of the permagrit block. There we go. That was harder work than I expected, but 4 layers of 48 gram cloth is a little bit more than I'm used to. So so what I'm going to do now is just clean this all up. I think I'm going to go and get some 120 that will probably do us. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just see how that comes out. I think what I'll do is I'll just pull a Vacform off of that, and I am worried about these sheer sides. We'll have to see how well it goes. I don't want it puckering as the Vacform works through here. So before I spend any more time on this, I think I'll have a look at how it Vacforms. I mean, this would actually make a very good plug if you wanted to now make it out of another material, and you could build it on this former, which is quite a nice way of doing things. But let's see if the Vacform works as intended. So I've got the plug set up on the table. I had hoped to do it on A5 styrene, which I've stapled to the board, but A5 was just a little bit too tight, too small. I think A4 is going to be a bit too big, so we'll give it a go and just see what happens. So what I'll do is I'll put this under the grill, this let's say this way up, until it sags, and I want about a 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inch sag in that, and then I'm just going to push it down straight on there with the vacuum engaged. That should do us. There, you can see how well that went down straight away. I kind of wiggled it and pulled it and stretched it to make sure it had some give before I pulled it down. Usually they just pop out, but there we go. And there we have our bucket seat. I just need to trim around the edge, and hopefully that will drop straight in. And to prove it wasn't a fluke, we'll do another one. I guess it was just luck, that first one. So they still need a little bit of trimming around the edges and magnets fitted for the front seat, because the front seat is lifted out to get to the wing bolts. The rear seat is probably going to be held in, maybe with magnets, maybe with screws, I'm not sure. The rear seat obviously pops out to access the servos, which you'll see they're hidden underneath there. Now, I won't need to get to those very often, I don't think, so I can probably just use screws. What you might see is interesting. In the rudder servo, or on the rudder servo, which is the one with the red arms, you'll see I've connected the cables, I don't know what you call them. They're attached to the underside of the arm. Now, you can get away with that, provided the arms don't swing so far that the screws that are holding everything together hits the body of the servo. And they don't in this case. They could if the servo turned through its full travel, but it doesn't need to travel more than 45 degrees. It's probably about 25 degrees each way to give me full rudder deflection, so I'm okay. It's not going to foul. And the reason I had to do that was I slightly miscalculated, and if I hadn't turned those screws around, then the floor of the seat would have hit the servo. So there you go, 2 seats. I'm really looking forward to doing the cockpit on this one. But as you can see, we've got a floor in there that's not correct, and we've got a bulkhead there that's also not correct. And we can see all the receiver bay with all the wires and everything under there as well. So I think I'm going to have to put a lid held on by magnets over the top of that box. The receiver's going in that box with all those wires. So I think I'm going to have to put some sort of lightweight lid over the top just to hide it, so that when you're actually looking into the rear cockpit, you don't see all that lot. So there we go. That's enough for this video. Oh, the wrinkles that I got in that seat, when you actually look at it, you can barely see them, because on the good side, they've closed right up and they're touching. So I've just put a little tiny trace of CA into the wrinkles to seal them, and then cut the wrinkles away from the back so that they're not in the way. And it's perfectly usable. But as you can see, I was having a lot of trouble trying to replicate the first one, which worked really well. The second and third, wouldn't have it. So I don't know what I was doing wrong. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it now. I've got some suitable subjects. I just need to trim the edges around and make them all neat and sand them up a little bit, maybe put a little bit of detail on. But that can all be done at a later stage. I just wanted to see if I could make them while we were waiting for those other bits. If you've enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.